there's the mirror. So it's the metaphor of the dust on the mirror. Has anyone heard of it? The dust on the mirror? No. Okay, so in this metaphor, it's quite commonly used in spiritual traditions. I think this came from a book called I can't remember the name, by Don Juan Ruiz. But anyway, but in this metaphor, nature. So the same way in that metaphor of the glass being consciousness and the water with the bubbles being the mind. In this one, the mirror, the clear mirror, reflects our true nature and reality. On top of the mirror, we get dust, layers of dust that's accumulated from when we're born. And the dust is the ego. So the more conditioning we have, the more beliefs we have, the more narratives we create about ourselves, the more attachments we have, desires and aversions, the more clouding of the mirror, the more dust on the mirror, the harder it is to see true reality. And what I mean by that is if you have an identity, I am not the type, I'm not a public speaker. If you have that identity, okay, you are unable to see reality as it is because you've made a clear decision that so if you say my identity is I'm not a public speaker and you find yourself in a situation where you need to speak in public, all of the fears around this breaking of your identity will mean that in that present moment you are completely unable to see reality as it is. You're not able to see the people around you without thinking about yourself. You're not able to perceive reality in that moment because of that fear. Similarly, sometimes if you're in a conversation with someone and you are thinking about where you need to be, or if there's someone else that you prefer to speak to, you're not able to be present in that moment because your mind has already gone somewhere else. Your ego may be saying, "Oh, I really want to speak to this person because they're a cool person, and I'm with this person who I don't think is as cool." Okay, and that means that your perception of reality is warped. Similarly, if you so fears and desires do that as well. It doesn't mean that we can't want things, but it's when the desire there's a difference between having a preference and having a desire that's pulling you out of the present moment. And then there's stories that we tell ourselves. So we'll say, oh, this is, this is we'll create a narrative around something. And so all of these things are creating clouds and layers, and we'll have societal conditioning as well, and actually on top of that, kind of drawing on last week, when we have a label for something, if we have um, a label for a color, for example, red. Red is all of these simple colors are incredibly reductive to reality. You might see a color and call it red, but there are an infinite number of shades of red. And so when we cannot see the label as a label and reality as, as a proxy to reality, we reduce our experience to that. And we're not able to see through the label. And so again, that doesn't mean that the label is the issue, it's the attachment to the label there. That's the conditioning that's creating the dust on the mirror. Does that make sense? And so this process that we go through to clear the dust, to try and see reality as it is, because we start to suffer as a result of this conditioning, our fears, our desires, this process that we go through to start to be more reflective, to meditate and observe things with curiosity, to deeply reflect, to use breath work to kind of calm the mind and see things. That process is a removal of the ego dominance. and we're going through this process. And ultimately, the reason why we're doing this is because the ego is not meant to be the master. We most of us are slaves to our ego, and with this consistent practice of the physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual components of our internal world, we start to be able to get parts of it under control. And then over time, eventually, the ego can function as it's meant to, which is to to protect ourself and give us an identity, but not to a point where it behaves too much. Either we get, yeah, we're not to a point where it dominates us, is essentially it. And so the classic thing is that we can have an ego that is organized around fear. So this is where most of us are. And when we have an ego that's organized around fear, we can either inflate ourselves and be, want credit for everything and want to be seen in a certain way, or we can have the other type of fear where we deflate ourselves, which is even more damaging, where we're not able to set boundaries. We don't want to be seen. We don't think our time is, we're not worthy of anyone's time. And we never set boundaries. We please people. Okay. I've definitely had parts of probably both. All of us probably do. But ideally you want it structured around, organized around integrity and truth, which is what this process we're going through is all about.